He had been sitting there speaking with Marjorie and Laura's when he felt it. Ghost. Something was happening with Ghost. He turned to Marjorie and told her he'd return in a moment and walked out into the hall. As he walked quickly, he didn't even notice that Walder hadn't kept up, just headed off to where he knew Ghost was. He saw it then. Ghost, looking threateningly at Prince Oberyn, the black pup growling beside him. He saw the prince reach to his waist and realized if he took out a weapon, he was done for. "Ghost to me," he said, and his wolf moved towards him. "I thank you." Prince Oberyn said, his relief clear. "Don't mention it, my prince. Don't mention it, my prince. You have me at a disadvantage," Oberyn said, looking at him. "Apologies, my prince Jon Snow," he said and smiled at him. It was as if time stood still. Then, and he realized it straight away with how the prince looked at him, he knew, or if he didn't, he would soon. His mind raced as he thought through the possibilities, as he went over the different scenarios in his brain. It was not the first time he'd done so. Ever since he'd first spoken to Richard about how to bring Dorne in, he'd considered what would actually happen should they find out the truth. Giving Oberyn the mountain was only partly a way to bring them on board. Jon knew better than most the love a brother could feel for a murdered sister, the thoughts of the justice. No vengeance he had sought for Rhaenys was clear, in his mind still. So whether they forgave him, accepted him, rejected him, or sought to punish him in some way he cared not, Ilya's brother deserved what he sought as much as Jon had. But it was supposed to be after the mountain had fallen, and not before, that he would seek to speak to Oberyn or Doran, after they had ceded their need for vengeance, and not before. "I have heard much about you, young man. The things you are said to have done are known even in Dorne," Prince Oberyn said, and if he was unsure he'd been recognized before, it was clear in how Oberyn looked at him, now that he certainly knew the truth. "People speak, my prince. I've played a small part, nothing more," he said. "You do yourself a disservice, Jon. My daughter speaks of you as if you're different, as if you'd been born a Dornishman instead of in the cool north," he said pointedly. "Your daughter, my prince?" Jon asked, trying to change the subject. "Sorella. She spoke to you earlier," Oberyn said with a smile. "Aye, she did. She seems most eager for knowledge. Something she inherited from me, perhaps, as I often find myself most eager to learn new and interesting things," Oberyn said, looking directly at him. He was about to reply when Walder arrived, the large man glaring at the prince before looking to see he was fine, and that Ghost was standing beside him. "I should be getting back. I've left my friends alone for much too long, I fear," Jon said. Now was certainly not the time to speak to the prince, he realized. "As should I. Maybe we could walk together. With those wolves of yours, I find myself most protected," Oberyn said with a smirk. "They do offer protection, but only when it's needed, my prince," he said. And Oberyn laughed then. They walked back to the ballroom, and while they did so in silence, he could feel Oberyn looking at him all the way, staring, searching out his features. But whatever he was looking for, he didn't seem to find this time. When they reached the room, he turned to bid the prince goodbye and once again found him staring at his face. "Will you be taking part in the tourney tomorrow, Jon?" "I'm afraid not, my prince. I injured my shoulder and need to rest up," he said. And Oberyn looked at his arm. "I was supposed to keep it in a sling, but, well," he said with a shrug. "But it's hard to dance while wearing a sling, is it not?" Oberyn said, and Jon smiled. He saw it again then, the recognition. And he knew it was the smile, his father's smile, it must be. Oh gods, it's Rhaenys' too. He recognizes her in me. "Is everything all right, Jon?" Marjorie asked, seeing his expression. "Aye, "Can we speak, you too, Loris? Not here, my room," he asked. "Of course, John," Marjorie said, and Loris nodded in agreement. They got up and left the hall, Ghost and the black pup walking with them when they got to his room. John unlocked it, and as soon as they entered, Rhaenys chirped at him, making him laugh. "What's so funny?" Marjorie asked. Rhaenys just asked if the wedding was fun. "What, you mean you can?" she said, looking at John and then at the dragon. Rhaenys is not an ordinary dragon, Marjorie. It's hard to explain, but she's my sister," John said, and Rhaenys chirped again and he frowned. "What?" Marjorie asked. "She just told me off for telling you like that," he said, abashed, and Marjorie laughed. "Good," she said, still laughing. "There's more to it. More stuff I've not told you. Loris knows some of it, but after I told you the other day, gods, if I told you the rest, you'd have probably ran away and not come back," he said. And she laughed some more as she shook her head in disagreement. "Tell me," she said determinedly. So he told her it all. The dreams, the warging. Told her of how he and Rhaenys had spoken together when he brought up the bit on the ship as he passed. "So that was, you thought you were, we were so worried, John, Jamie, and I," Loris said, and he got up from the bed and walked over, placing a hand on Loris's shoulder. I'm sorry I didn't tell you it all. I didn't understand it at the time. I still don't," he said, and Loris nodded as he walked back to sit beside Marjorie. "I can't say I understand it either, warging. I mean, how does it work? I mean, you take control of an animal, but how?" "You wish to see?" he asked. "I do," she said. He closed his eyes and found the door open, as always. Ghost walked over to Marjorie and licked her hand, making her laugh before she looked to John and then back to the wolf. "Done," she said to Ghost, and as Ghost he nodded before letting go of the connection. Are you?" John stumbled over his words as he looked at her before she smiled at him. "No, John, it's good. It's most strange and I do not understand it, but it's good," she said, and he relaxed. Muscles. "But this isn't what made you bring us here, is it?" Loris asked, and John nodded. "No, it's Oberyn. He knows who I am," he said. And Marjorie looked worried at him while Loris just smiled. "This is good, with Dorne on our side. John, this is better than good," Loris said, not noticing the worried looks on both John's and Marjorie's faces. "It's not that simple, Loris," Marjorie said. "Given the circumstances of John's birth, the Dornish may not be willing to support him. They may even blame him," she said. And despite his own worry, John couldn't help but smile at her. She understood. He didn't even need to tell her, and she understood. "But they can't blame him for that," Loris said angrily. "They might, though," John said, and Rhaenys chirped loudly and for a long time, making him nod his head. "Done," Marjorie said, looking at him. "I think I may have an idea," he said, smiling at her before taking her hand in his. Lannisport, 294 AC, Brienne. She was excited at the prospect of taking part in the tourney. While not as large as the last one she'd taken part in, it was simply being allowed to do so, allowed to be herself, that had her excited. She only wished she'd have felt this way last night and gone to the wedding feast. John and Loris had both come to her before the wedding offering to escort her, and she was flattered by it, but she remembered the dances at Tarth, and so she in the end pretended to be unwell. She knew how she looked in a dress, and compared to all these other ladies she'd have felt ridiculous. And despite her new friends saying they wished her there, she wondered if they really meant it. She didn't think she could take it if John and Loris ended up being like the rest, and so she had hidden in her room like a craven. Better to be humiliated privately than in public, she had thought. And so while breaking her fast, She had smiled when talk turned to the dancing and said she was sad. She missed it. Now she was putting her armor on and readying herself for the melee. She had hoped to take part in the squire duel she heard John and Laura speak of previously. But given the numbers of eligible participants and the fact of this being a smaller tourney, it ended up being a melee like King's Landing instead, though the rules were much more stringent, and here there were 3 knights on the field with them to ensure they were followed. "I wish you good fortune, Brienne," Laura said, taking a seat beside her. You too, Loras," she said, smiling back at him. When time came, they walked out together. She hoped he'd make it to the end, and that she did too. She found herself looking forward to crossing swords with him if given the chance. She looked around at the field. The 3 knights were close enough to intervene, but not to get in the way. Around her stood 10 and 5 opponents ranging in age, from 10 to her own. 4 and 10, there were some small boys and one who was close to her own size, but she was perhaps the largest one here. "My lords, ladies and good men and women of Lannisport, the West and beyond, welcome to the wedding tourney of Lord Jaime and Lady Daisy Lannister. I give you first the squire's melee with a first prize of 2,000 dragons. You may begin." The herald shouted, and then she was fighting. The 2 boys who came towards her were both wearing purple unicorn sigils, house bracks, she thought, and then looked to see it was the 2 brothers, Robert and Walder. John had pointed out some of the competitors to her earlier and told her who to look out for. These 2 were not among them. She moved quickly. The younger brother carried a mace and he was ill-suited for the job, and she easily dodged the blow. The older was a little better, but not by much. The sword clashed against her own, and she moved so. Both boys were lined up. If she timed this right, she could take both out easily. She did. And as the sword swung again, she deflected the blow so it caught the other brother instead of her. As one brother looked angrily at the other and the other tried to apologize, she swept one off his feet and disarmed the other, pointing her sword to their necks one after the other. They yielded, and she moved on. Loras easily defeated his opponent, and she admired his skill before she was faced with the boy who was closest to her in size. The boy was a Banefort, and John had told her to be wary of his strength, something she found to be a wise warning as the boy swung a warhammer at her. She looked on as one of the knights moved closer, worried perhaps that, given the boy's strength, someone could be seriously hurt. "I've never fought a girl before," the boy laughed. "Good. After this, you can tell people what it was like to lose to one," she said, smirking as she quickened her pace. The problem with strength and wielding a weapon which relied upon it was speed could beat you, and so she used hers. When he swung and missed, she didn't, and she laid traps for him, directing him where she wished him to go. Each time he followed, and each time once he'd missed, she hit him, and hit him hard. In the end, it wasn't one strike which won it for her, but a combination of them. The boy would be bruised in the morning, but she had beaten him. And as she looked around, there were only 7 others left. 6, she corrected herself as Loras beat another. No, 5 as Lancel took out one more. She moved to her left and found herself up against a Dornish boy who carried a spear. She took a step forward warily, having never faced one before. The boy with the spear. "John, how do you fight that?" she asked. "It's easier if you know his moves, but should you not, then you need to allow him to dictate the fight for a bit. Allow him to show you them while keeping away from him. Let him be aggressive and then use that to win. At some point he'll overextend, and then you block the spear with your sword and take him with another weapon." "I don't carry another weapon. You'll be the weapon then." She did as she had been advised, moving back when he swung, letting him become overconfident, letting him dictate. She had to jump over low strikes and block or duck high ones, but she wasn't hit once, and then it happened. He came in for a low strike and she blocked it with her sword, forcing the spear to the ground. She stepped forward and smacked him with her head, forcing him to drop the spear to the ground. "Yield," she said, holding her sword to his neck. "I yield," he said, smiling when she offered him her hand. "I wish you good fortune, my lady," he said. And she nodded. She turned to look to see Loras and Lancel face each other. She was surprised Lancel made it this far, given what Jon had said of him. Even more so when she saw how woefully outmatched he was in every aspect against Loras. Speed, strength, technique. Loras had him beat on it all, and the fight only went on as long as it did as he didn't wish to embarrass the boy. Once done, he turned and smiled as she walked towards him. He had made it, and so had she. If she lost, then she'd feel no shame, and should she win, she'd relish it as being even more worth it. And Loras Jon is my friend Brienne, and I'd no more tell you how to beat him than I would tell you of myself, Jon said, and she smiled at him. "Shall we?" Loras said with a small bow that from someone else she may have found mocking. "I think we shall. To 5, Loras?" "Aye, 5 it is." She lost the first point in a blink of an eye. She thought Jon was the only one she'd ever faced who moved that quickly. The second one she took with a flurry of strikes, finally finding an opening to catch his leg. The blow must have hurt as the next 2 went to her. One a strike to his shoulder, the other to his leg. He caught her with 2 then, spinning and turning, and she smiled, knowing those he definitely picked up, sparring with Jon. At 3, each had slowed down. The first 6 points had come in a matter of moments. The next one took almost twice the time. They crossed blades over and over. She slashed high, and he blocked spinning to come in low, which she dodged. He thrust, and she parried, her ripostes finding no purchase. On and on they went, and she felt the crowd in the arena grow excited. In the end, the blow she caught him with that took the point was purely accidental, and she apologized as she caught his helm, though he smiled and waved it off. "I'm sorry, Loras. I didn't mean." "It's all right. Brienne, no harm done." "Do you need a moment?" "I'm well. Shall we?" he said. And she nodded. Whether he was or not, she didn't know. But the last point came very quickly, and she almost felt badly for taking the victory. The strike to her mind was one he should have parried easily, and had she not caught his head, she may have thought he'd thrown the match. As it was, she worried that she'd hurt him more than he was letting on. He did celebrate with her, though. He raised her arm and smiled at her as she took the plaudits. "My lords, ladies and men and women of Lannisport, I give you the winner of the Squires' Melee, Lady Brienne of Tarth," the herald said, and the crowd cheered. She looked up to see Jon smile at her. Beside him, his sister Joy and Marjorie cheered her on. Lord Jaime clapped politely while his wife was far more enthusiastic. She saw Prince Oberyn and his daughters all cheering wildly, and then saw her father look at her, his face full of pride. She bowed, and then she and Loras walked from the arena. She had won, she had beaten him, and as she felt his arm pat her back, she finally felt a sense of belonging. Jaime, when Jon came to him this morning, he had been thankful he'd given him the night. Had he come the night before his wedding night, may not have been as pleasant as it was. Given the news he had shared, Jaime was pretty certain he'd have spent the night worrying rather than in the arms of his wife. As it was, he had spoken to Arthur, and despite their doubts, they had both agreed that Jon was right on this. There was no point in waiting further, though Arthur himself would remain an unknown until after the mountain was dealt with. Arriving at the tourney, he had caught the stares. Oberyn was giving Jon and found the prince looking at him also, but beside him, his wife's enthusiasm was only diluted by the fact she couldn't compete herself, something she had not been pleased about. Jaime having to explain the rules that as hosts, they couldn't compete in their own tourney, and then agreeing to bring her to another as soon as one was occurring, so they sat and watched the Squires' melee. He had considered not having one given the numbers. He could have had duels, but the ages were all wrong. It was one thing for the younger lads, but the older ones needed something like this. So after speaking with Arthur, he had come up with a way his aunt wouldn't be too upset with him, and this was the result. Seeing Brienne win was tempered for him by the fact it was Loras who lost. He had also been worried by the strike to his helm, though it seemed to not be too bad. "She's very good," Daisy said. I can see why John recommended her." "John did?" "Aye. Said she'd benefit from training under us. That and her being a lady," Jamie said. "What about her being a lady?" Daisy asked, a note of annoyance in her voice. "Well, not everywhere is as enlightened as the North or Dorne in knowing ladies can't just fight but can win," he said, and Daisy smiled at him. "You really are a charmer when you want to be, aren't you?" she said, and he laughed. "No, I just know my lady can wield a mace better than any man I know," he said, and she leaned in to kiss him. "My lords, ladies, and good men and women of Lannisport, I give you the melee, first prize 5,000 gold dragons," the herald shouted. Jamie looked out on the field to see those he recognized. The Strongbow and Adam had decided to take part, as had what looked to be one of Oberyn's daughters, though the prince himself had surprisingly decided not to. Walder was fighting, and the blunted double axe he held looked just as imposing as the one he had made for the man. Sir Wendell had decided to fight, as had Oberyn's former squire Sir Daemon, but the field was devoid of a lot of the main participants these events usually brought in. The Vale had not come, which he found surprising, unless Jon Arryn had told them or suggested to them he would not be happy if they did. The Stormlands, too, had been badly underrepresented, with Beric Dondarrion and Bryce Cairn the only two lords who'd come. From the Riverlands, it was just House Darry and House Mallister, but Patrick was saving himself for the Joust Sand. Raymond was not a melee fighter either. He did smile when Thoros came running in late, followed by a squire carrying his swords before dumping them on the ground. He watched as the Red Priest picked one up, and with the lighting of his sword, the melee began. Jamie spent most of the early part of the fighting looking at Walder, watching him move. He'd not really had a chance to train the man yet, and was glad Arthur would be able to spend more time with him. But watching him as he swung that axe, as it collided with the first opponent and knocked him off his feet, for sheer brute strength alone, the man was a dangerous opponent. "Did you see that?" Daisy said excitedly from beside him. "I wouldn't wish to face him myself," he said. And she smirked. "Don't worry, my love. I'll protect you from the big bad giant," she said. And he laughed, making Jenna look to him. 30 men had lined up to take part in the melee, and already more than 10 of them had been eliminated. He looked to see Adam and the Strongbow team up to take out 3 men, all wearing Frey colors, and he laughed. He'd completely forgotten they'd even come. He then thanked the gods he'd not had to spend time with any more of the weasels than had been absolutely necessary. Why they had decided it was a good idea to go after the Strongbow alone was beyond him. With Adam backing him up, it ended up just being funny. Walder was facing one of Lord Brax's men, who was doing his best to keep out of the range of the axe, and was managing to do so. He looked on in surprise when the man managed to disarm Walder. Not that it seemed to actually help the man any. Walder simply ran at him, as he was almost celebrating knocking the axe away. The collision must have sent the man 20 feet. It was like an Aruax charging. Even up here in the stands, people grimaced at the sound of the impact. Walder just turned and picked up his axe and waited for the next opponent. Looking back out, he saw Adam had been beaten by Oberyn's former squire, who it seemed was also shadowing the man's daughter. The girl used a spear and used it well, but using it against the Strongbow wasn't just ineffective, it was damn stupid. Jamie watched as she buzzed around the giant man like a small fly to a horse. He could almost see the smile on the Strongbow's face, his greatsword ready to be used to painful effect. "She's brave, I'll give her that," Daisy said, and he nodded as he looked to see Oberyn looking on worriedly. "She's stupid, though. If he hits her, she'll be badly hurt," Jamie said, looking at the girl's lack of armor. Sir Damon moved, trying to get to her, but was faced with Thoros and his flaming blade. Jaime didn't know which way to look. He heard the gasp as the strongbow grabbed the shaft of the spear when the girl struck. Could almost hear the groan from the girl as he ripped it from her hands and swung his sword. The clang as it hit the axe was drowned out by cheers. Walder stood facing the strongbow and dwarfing him in height. "How did he get there so fast?" Daisy asked. "I don't know, but this is going to be something," he replied as Walder and the strongbow faced off. The two men moved around each other slowly, almost sizing each other up, which, given that the strongbow was close to 7 feet, and Walder over it, that wasn't surprising when they moved, though their speed, or more accurately, Walder's, belied his size. The strongbow was fast. For a big man, Walder, though, was just fast. Size was irrelevant. The man moved as if he was half the size, and Jaime watched as the strongbow struggled to keep up. The axe and greatsword rang out as the two clashed. Jaime looked on as Walder caught the strongbow on the shoulder, as the greatsword caught Walder on the side. "How can they take that?" Daisy asked, wincing as Walder caught the strongbow again. "I've no idea." The end came when Walder actually swept the strongbow's legs from under him, using a move both Loras and Jon used countless times, and Jaime burst out laughing as the axe was placed on Strongbow's neck. He yielded and was helped up, and his own booming laugh and slap on Walder's back were as loud as their weapons had been when they clashed. He watched as one left the field while the other turned to continue. There were 5 left. Thoros had somehow become disengaged from fighting Sir Damon and instead was facing Sir Wendell, Daisy beside him cheering on her fellow Northerner. While Walder was now faced with Oberyn's daughter and Sir Damon, Jaime felt for all Sir Wendell's skill or luck in getting to this point, he was done for. So instead, once again concentrated on Walder's fight, something he in the end was glad of. Up until now, Walder's strength and speed had been enough. Now facing 2 opponents who not only were working together, but knew how to, was going to prove a different test. Jaime watched as they circled before attacking simultaneously, both coming at the side, forcing Walder to choose who to face. He instinctively chose right, but it was also the end for him, as he over-concentrated on Sir Damon, allowing Oberyn's daughter to trip him with the spear. As his axe fell, both of them advanced and he yielded. He did well, Daisy said, disappointed, as Sir Wendell too had been defeated. "He did, but watch and see what he did wrong," Jaime said as the two turned to face Thoros. They tried the same move, both circling, and just as before, Thoros turned to concentrate on Sir Damon, though he did so in only a half turn. When Oberyn's daughter came in with the spear, he jumped it, and with her off balance, he moved to her, and it was she who fell to the ground. His leg sweep catching her completely by surprise. She had yielded even before Sir Damon moved, the flaming sword still a foot from her face. Thoros spun, and he watched as the flames flew in the air when his sword and Sir Damon's struck against each other. Both men were skilled, but the flames were the difference. Every time Thoros brought the sword anywhere near Sir Damon's face, the man visibly flinched, and as he hit the sword against his arm, Damon dropped his own and reached to put out flames that weren't there. With that, the melee was over, and Thoros had claimed another victory. Jon. He was determined to enjoy the tourney, even with the specter of Oberyn Martell hanging over his head. When he arrived, he had taken Sansa, Marjorie, and Joy to shop at the stalls. They had left the wolves at Casterly Rock. Jon had enough trouble getting Ghost to behave. Having the 2 pups act up would be too much. His arm was aching him some too, and after speaking to the maester, he had been told to place it back in its sling, giving him another reason not to wish to run after errant wolves. Sansa was walking around almost as excited as Joy. Her first tourney coming so soon after the wedding was more than she could have hoped for. Seeing the stalls selling everything from food to jewelry, from fabrics to drinks, he was glad he brought a lot of coin with him. Joy was her usual boisterous self, stopping at stalls and asking for pen nuts, and at one an odd sugary stick, which he seemed to adore. "Jon, try," she said, holding the stick in her hand. Yummy," he said after pretending to try it, making her laugh. "Margie," he heard Joy say. And so he looked to Marjorie, and she did the same, even adding in the rubbing of her stomach, which made Joy laugh louder. Sans, but she got no answer. "Says try," and his sister turned around, having been looking at the fabrics. "Oh no, thank you, Joy," Sansa said to a frown. "I think you should try some, Sansa," Jon said with a wink and mouthed, "Pretend," which Sansa did, making Joy smile again. "Jon, can we go over to this stall?" "Of course, Sansa," he said, and they walked to the fabrics. Sansa in the end bought a lot. Well, actually, it was Jon who bought it as Sansa. It turned out he'd forgotten her coin purse. Not that he minded. He knew his little sister would end up giving most of it away in the form of presents anyway. After stopping off to eat, they made their way to the arena, Jorah's following. But Jon knew Arthur was here somewhere too. His knight was not happy at having to basically hide from Oberyn and not willing to do so completely. After making sure the girls were seated, he and Marjorie went to wish good luck to Brienne and Loras. He spoke to his friend for quite a bit before he left him with Marjorie so he could speak to Brienne. After giving her some advice when she asked, he and Marjorie walked back to see Sansa and Joy speaking to Martin, Willem, Tion, and Walder, the four boys matching Sansa's enthusiasm almost. Seeing Loras and Brienne square off had been exciting to even him. He had watched some of the other fights, almost bored, both at not being able to compete himself and because the outcomes were far too easy to predict. Brienne and Loras were clearly far superior than those they faced, and barring ill luck would no doubt make it to the end. He instead had been more excited by Sansa's reactions, by Marjorie's worry over Loras, and by Joy's playing with her pen nuts. "Your brother will be fine, Marjorie," he said, moving close to whisper in her ear. "I know it's just. I worry so," she said back. "I do too. But if I thought he was in any danger, I'd be out there with him, injury or no," he said, and she smiled, relaxing some. "Joy Peanut," Jon said, and Joy shook her head while laughing. "For Margie, Joy?" "Margie," Joy said, looking to Marjorie as if to make sure Jon wasn't trying to fool her. "Thank you, Joy," Marjorie said when she offered her the peanut. And Joy nodded back at Jon, who smiled and winked at her. "No, Tion, my pennuts," Joy said. Then giggling as Tion reached forward for one, Jon looked to Sansa and rolled his eyes, making her laugh. Buying Joy the bag of peanuts was both fun and annoying at the same time. He turned to see Loras and Brienne were ready to fight, and he watched on, his hand falling to hold Marjorie's when she gasped at the knock. Loras took to the head. In the end, it was that which won it for Brienne, and he cheered on, as did Marjorie once she realized Loras was well. They didn't have long to wait until the melee, and this Jon found much more interesting. Not only was Walder fighting in it, but Thoros too. For some reason, the Red Priest fascinated him even more since Arthur's revelations. Knowing one of them wished to see him made him eager to know more of their strange religion, and Thoros was the only other of them he even knew existed. While Marjorie and Sansa spoke of Highgarden and Joy feeling a little sleepy curled up beside him, Jon watched the melee take place. Walder did incredibly well. He was unlucky in the end, and Jon knew it was purely his inexperience that cost him. Knowing Arthur would soon be training him amongst others, that wouldn't be a problem for long. Watching Thoros win was incredible though, and Jon tried to see the secret to the burning blade. He knew it was liquid of some sort, but what it was he couldn't be sure. With the melee done with, they headed to eat before the joust. Joy, though it seemed, along with the younger boys, were tired out. So it had just been him, Marjorie, Sansa, Loras, and Brienne, both of whom had joined once they had changed. Loras seeming to feel no ill effects from the knock to the head he took. They were sitting in Tyrion's tavern enjoying their meal when Jon spotted Richard. Motioning to him, he took his leave and walked to the back and up the stairs. One of Richard's men stood guard outside the room, and he and Richard walked in. "My king? Have you sent Lorch's body to Dorne?" "I have my king. It left days ago." "Damn, you're far too good at your job," he said with a small laugh. "Why do you ask, my king?" "Richard, please, Jay or John," he said, and Richard nodded. "Oberyn knows," he said, and Richard took a seat. How has he reacted? "He's not yet, but he knows. I think my smile gave me away," he said, rubbing his head as if the idea was preposterous. "It's your father's smile, Jay. My sister's too. So now what? I have a plan. Rhaenix's plan, actually. I was hoping, had Lorch's body still been here, to show him and help explain. There's a letter too from Ilya, but I know not what it says. You could open it, Jay. Say it was unsealed." "I couldn't. Richard, it's between them. I'll deal with it, whatever I says. But it's from Ilya to her brothers, if it was Rhaenys and I." "I understand. Is everything set with the mountain?" "Aye, it is. We're all set to go. Jaime told me of your vision. You think it true?" "I do. If I can speak to him, convince him, maybe he'll listen," Jay said. "And if he doesn't, then I'll have to make sure he survives," he said determinedly. "I'll be heading off on the morrow. I won't see you for some time. Be safe, my king," Richard said. "You too, Richard. And Richard, thanks for listening. Always, my king." Ooh, Sansa. Once they had finished eating, they walked back to watch the joust. And if Sansa was excited by the tourney beforehand, how she was now made that look like boredom. The idea of knights jousting, of racing down a tilt towards each other, had until that point been a dream for her. Something she read in a book. Now she was actually going to see it happen in front of her. Jon and Loras explained the colors and decorations on the horses, and she looked out to see the knights lined up, their armor gleaming. "Do you have many tourneys at Highgarden, Marjorie?" she asked. "My father loves tourneys and balls and feasts. Sansa, I believe you'll see your share," Marjorie said, smiling back, and Sansa felt her heart race. Balls, an actual proper ball, while not much different than the wedding in some respects, in others they were. And it was these that she looked forward to most, to the dresses and the dances, to the music and pageantry. The little girl who had read and looked at drawings and books of such things, who had hoped to see them one day, and now she was actually going to be a part of them. She was lost in this daydream as the first two knights lined up. "Who are they, Jon?" she asked, having missed the names and not recognizing the colors. "They're two hedge knights, Sansa, both from the Stormlands, I believe." She watched as the two horses rode towards each other, heard the crash of the lances as they hit the shields. Both men remained on their horses, and they turned and rode once again. She gasped when the man was knocked from his horse, looked on worriedly as he lay on the ground once he moved, though she looked eagerly on as the next two knights began their run. Over and over it went. Lord Jorah defeated a knight from House Brax. Sir Wendell fell to Lord Beric Dondarrion, Sir Adam defeating a knight from House Westerling. She heard the hum in the crowd and looked on excitedly as the large man Walder had fought faced off against Prince Oberyn, feeling both excitement and disquiet from Jon and Marjorie, with Loras looking on almost angrily. The joust itself went 4 tilts, with Prince Oberyn unhorsing the large man, the strong boar she heard Jon call him, while there were cheers. There were those who booed too, not that it bothered the prince. She was feeling thirsty and was about to ask for something to drink, when a serving girl brought her some fruit juice. She looked to Jon and smiled. He had ordered it for her and Marjorie, knowing they'd wish it. As the joust went on, she found her excitement undimmed. She cringed and gasped when a knight fell, but cheered when they rose again. In the end, it got down to the final 4. Prince Oberyn had looked majestic. Jorah, too, had been incredible. Sir Adam and Lord Beric being the others who had made it this far. Sir Adam was her choice. He rode so elegantly. Lord Dondarrion was dashing and flamboyant, but to her mind, he couldn't come close to Sir Adam. Jorah was fierce like the bear on his sigil, and the Northerner in her wished to cheer for him. But Jon had no problem declaring that Oberyn would win, so she felt fine picking Sir Adam. Margaery and Loras were both hoping for Jorah to win, and she sensed neither were too pleased her brother had picked Oberyn. Jon was too close to Margaery, and Brienne too close to Loras for her to ask either of them why the Tyrells had a problem with the Dornish prince without being overheard, so she resolved to find out later. Brienne stayed almost silent during the joust, her expression remarkably like Jon's, just sitting, studying, almost as if they both were picking apart styles and forms. "It's Adam against Jorah," Jon said, and she moved to the edge of her seat. When she looked up to see Lynessi and the babe looking on worriedly, she felt a sense of guilt. Lynes was her friend, and Sansa was cheering for her husband's opponent. She almost couldn't look at her, but it was the crashing of the lances which drew her attention anyway. The first tilt ended with both lances broken, the second the same, as did the third when they got to the fourth, though it was clear Jorah's power was beating Adam's skill. "Jorah's going to win," she said, half excited and half upset. "Aye, he is," Jon said. And so it was proved right, as in the next tilt Adam fell. "Is he all right?" she said worriedly, but he almost jumped to his feet, making her smile. "It seems he is little sister," Jon said before turning to whisper something to Margaery, which made her almost curl up in laughter. She frowned at her brother, thinking he just teased her, but when she saw his confused look, she wondered if she'd been mistaken. As she was thinking on it, Prince Oberyn and Lord Beric rode out. This contest was very different. 2 tilts was all it lasted, and Prince Oberyn won it easily once she saw Lord Beric was well. She called Jon to speak to him, watching as he nodded before switching seats with Brienne. "Jon, what is it with Margaery and Loras and Prince Oberyn?" she whispered as softly as she could. "Lord Willis injured his leg in a joust against Prince Oberyn. While it was an accident, Willis bears the injury still, and so the prince is not their favorite person." "Oh, but you're cheering for him," she said a little too loudly. "You think I'd cheer for him against a Northman?" "Against Jorah?" he said, aghast. I just thought you said he'd win," she said, abashed. "Aye, he will, but that doesn't mean I'm cheering for him. Something Margaery thankfully understands now," he said, looking at Margaery, who was smiling at something with Brienne. "What were you laughing at with Margaery earlier?" she asked. "What, when?" "When you whispered to her," she said. "Wait, is that why you looked at my strangely, did you think, Sansa?" "I wouldn't tease you not behind your back, not when you're so fun to tease while right in front of me, little sister," he said, nudging her shoulder with his own. "Jon, don't you dare," she said, laughing at him. "I won't. It wasn't you I was talking about. We were just talking about the Queen of Love and Beauty." "Oh, I don't see how's that funny." "It's not. I was just saying if I ever want to joust, I'd be forced to crown Ghost," Jon said, and Sansa looked at him in confusion. "I don't understand." Margaery asked who I'd crown if I won. Well, I couldn't crown Margaery because Joy wouldn't be happy, and I couldn't crown you because Joy wouldn't be happy, and I couldn't crown Joy because Margaery or I wouldn't be happy, she said, smirking. "Aye, so that leaves Ghost anyway." That's what I told Margaery during the earlier jousts. But why was she laughing now? "Look over there. See the garland that's for the Queen of Love and Beauty," Jon said, pointing to some flowers. "I see them. Oh, they're so pretty," she said, picturing them placed on her head. "Aye. Now imagine them on Ghost's head," Jon said. She couldn't help it. The laughter just burst out. She almost doubled over at the idea of the white wolf crowned in flowers. It took her a few minutes to compose herself. She needed to borrow Jon's handkerchief to wipe her eyes. Having laughed so much tears had fallen. She had actually missed the first 2 tilts and looked on as in the third. Prince Oberyn caught Jorah so flush he practically flew from the horse. She worried for a moment until he stood up and waved to Linnacy, looking up to give her friend a small smile herself. "My lord and ladies, men and women of Lannisport, the West and beyond, I give you the winner of the joust, Prince Oberyn Martell." She looked on as the prince rode to the garland and picked up the flowers on the end of his lance before riding to where his daughters and paramour sat. What a paramour was, she had no idea, other than the prince was unmarried. "My love, Ellaria, I name you the Queen of Love and Beauty," Oberyn said as he laid the flowers in her hand. She smiled before turning to Jon, only to find him staring down at Marjorie, who had her head turned away from the arena and was looking back at her brother. She looked from one to the other and to the prince and Ellaria. She was sure. Then it wouldn't be Ghost who Jon would crown if he won, Oberyn. The boy had smoothly ditched him the night before. He'd give him that much. He had watched him leave the feast almost as soon as they returned, and for the rest of the night he had sat so quietly that Ellaria worried about him. He had smiled and tried to be attentive, but he knew he'd failed, so he had made it up to her in their bed later on. While Ellaria slept, he stood at the window naked, the cold night air keeping his warm blood from boiling. Everything became clear to him then, though the details still escaped him. But he knew who the boy was. He knew who his father was, who his mother was, and everything began to click into place. Eddard Stark had done what he hadn't been able to do, and while a part of him admired the man for it, his own failure hung over his head like an axe. He had saved his nephew while Oberyn's had died, while his niece had died. Both men had lost their sisters. But he had something left of his while Oberyn was left alone with nothing but memories. "Come back to bed, my love," Ellaria said as she rolled over to find him not there. "Sleep, my love, I must think," he said. And she drifted back to sleep. He had found himself thinking for most of the night and pretty much the entirety of the next day. Breaking his fast, preparing for the tourney, even riding in the jousts hadn't cleared his mind. It was only naming Ellaria his queen of love and beauty, which did so, and even then only for the briefest of moments. Soon he felt himself drawn back to Harrenhal. On the day the smiles died, he saw her. Then the wolf girl, and now looking to the stands, he saw her son. The boy looked more like his father. He could see it clearly now, but she was part of him too. As he finished removing his armor, he was joined by Richard Lonmouth, and he knew that he was involved in this also. He looked to the man, his good brother's former squire, and wondered how long he'd known, how long they'd kept this secret hidden from him. He had to know. He needed to know. Was this the plan all along? Had this been what Rhaegar wanted? Did he leave his sister to die? Her children to die so her son could live while Elias did not? How long? Less than a year. You expect me to believe that? He sneered. I care not what you believe, Oberyn. You seem to forget, unlike the rest of the world. I don't fear the Viper. I died many years ago, old friend. Every day since I've known the truth has been a second life to me, so death holds no fear for me. You intend to put that boy on the throne. That boy is my king, and he will sit the throne. Of that there is no doubt. You think Dorne will accept this? He said angrily. Frankly, I could give two fucks what Dorne will and won't accept. You think it was I who sent you Varys' head? I who brought you here for the mountain? Or I who ensured Lorch got exactly what he fucking deserved? Richard said. Lorch is dead? He said, surprised. Aye. His body is on its way to Darren as we speak. Now come. Jaime Lannister wishes to speak to you and Oberyn. I'd leave your knives behind, or those answers you seek will never be found. You would have me walk into the lion's den unarmed? If anyone wished you harm, Oberyn, we wouldn't be speaking right now, Richard said, turning and walking away. He finished dressing and hid the small knife and the cutoff in his small clothes before walking to follow Richard. When he saw Damon and Nim, he called them over to tell Ilaria he'd see her later. Then he walked to where Richard was waiting with a horse saddled for him. He mounted, and they rode fast to Casterly Rock. He was brought to a room, and he sat and stewed waiting for over an hour until Jaime Lannister arrived. "Richard, you can go," Jaime said, and Richard looked at him before nodding. "Lannister. He wishes to speak to you, should you harm him in any way. I'll make it my life's mission that every member of your family will suffer. I will spend ever a single piece of gold I have. I'll fucking hire the faceless men themselves with one goal only, to see the end of House Martell. You, your daughters, your paramour, your brother, niece, and nephews, all of them gone, your former squire you're so fond of, gone." Jaime said with such surety that he gulped. "He means that much to you? He is my king," Jaime said and turned, so he followed. They walked to the lift and came out at the family wing. He was taken down a corridor and saw the giant guard and the other one who followed Jon Snow around. Jaime knocked at the door and Jon opened it, giving Jaime a smile before he motioned for Oberyn to come inside. Once he did, the White Wolf was on him, immediately pinning him to the door. He felt fear, then genuine fear as he looked in the wolf's red eyes. Compared to this, the other meeting had been friendly, and he looked to Jon, who seemed to have his eyes closed. "The knife. Take it out, please. I'd suggest slowly," Jon said, and he looked to see the wolf baring its teeth. He took the knife out and threw it on the floor, feeling able to breathe again as the wolf left him and walked over to stand by the boy. "Forgive me for that, but I didn't wish you to do something stupid. I'd prefer you alive, my prince," Jon said with a soft laugh. "How did you know? I'm a warg. Ghost is my companion, my protector, my friend," he said, rubbing the wolf's head. "He's not the only one," Jon said, and Oberyn looked on in astonishment as a white dragon flew and landed on the boy's shoulders. "That's how. That's impossible." "Is it? I suppose you're right. What do you say, Rhaenys, are you impossible?" Jon said, and the dragon chirped. "No, she says she's very much possible, my prince." He laughed. "She?" he asked, confused, thinking the boy had named the dragon for his father. She, my sister," he said softly as the dragon chirped again. "You named her for Rhaenys?" He asked, a small smile on his face before he realized. "No, she is Rhaenys. You may want to sit for this." Jon motioned to a small chair which he sat on. "I don't. She can't be. She's a dragon." "Can a dragon even be a she?" His words stumbling from his lips. "A dragon is not a slave. Not even two. It's gender. But she is my sister." The dragon began chirping and Jon nodded before smiling. "You can speak to her? I can understand her. We're bonded. We've always been bonded," Jon said as he stroked the dragon's neck. "I don't. This makes no sense," he said, shaking his head. "There was a day years ago. You and Ilaria visited Dragonstone to see Elia and Rhaenys. Aegon hadn't been born yet. Rhaenys was always an early riser and she liked to wake up Elia and our father, but father wasn't on Dragonstone and Elia had given you their rooms, do you remember?" Jon said, and he nodded. "Remember what happened when she snuck in to wake Elia and father up? What she found?" He remembered it almost as if it was yesterday. He and Ilaria had been in the middle of it when she came in. She had run out to find her mother to tell her that Oberyn had been hurting Auntie Ilaria. For the first time since he had met his paramour, she had actually been embarrassed. He couldn't. There was no way he could know this. The dragon began to chirp again as Oberyn looked at both it and the boy, trying to make sense of them both. "I don't know. Will it work?" More chirping and shaking of the dragon's head. "If you say so." More chirping. "Aye, fine. You do know best, sister," Jon said, laughing. He looked on in wonder as Jon walked to him and held out the dragon for him to take in his hands. He took it, and as he held it, he looked into its eyes. They were a deep purple, and he could see her, see Rhaenys. He watched as Jon walked to a chest, reaching in and taking out something wrapped in cloth. It seemed he struggled with it, his injured arm not allowing him to lift it properly. But he did, and carried it to the table. The dragon chirped at him, tilting its head as it looked into his own eyes. He could see tears reflected, his tears, and he felt the dragon almost wish to wipe them as it moved closer. "She says she missed you, uncle. She missed you so much," Jon said softly, and the dragon chirped. I missed you too, Rhaenys," he said, wiping his eyes as he felt the dragon lean against his chest. "I don't know what it is exactly we're going to see. I need you put Rhaenys on the table, my prince," Jon said, and he reluctantly did as he was told. On the table were glass candles, 4 of them. He looked on as Jon handed him one, before picking up another. The one he held in his hand was black, the one Jon held, green. It was merely a moment later that the green candle lit up, followed by the one in his own hand. He looked on in awe. He had seen them once in the Citadel, each acolyte sent down to spend a night trying to light them with their mind, none ever succeeding, and Jon Snow had done it as if it was nothing. He saw the image then, the place he recognized immediately, Harrenhal. He saw himself sitting there in the Hall of 100 Hearths, the feast going on, and then he saw her, saw Elia, and it was... Things will change soon, brother. When they do, no matter what happens, talk to me first. Promise me, brother, promise me you'll speak to me before you do anything rash. Me do something rash? You must have me mistaken with someone else. He laughed. Oberyn, promise me. I promise, Elia. The image changed, and it was Elia and Rhaegar, and they were arguing, and he felt his rage rise. You were not supposed to do it so publicly, Rhaegar. I'm sorry, Elia. I don't know what came over me. The same thing which comes over us all. You love-struck fool. I know it wasn't supposed to be this way. Elia, forgive me. I can forgive easy enough my brothers, not so much. Elia laughed. We'll talk to them, explain it all. We will. The images changed. Once again, he was storming from a room, his sister running after him. Oberyn. It's not what it seems. That man shamed you, Elia. He shamed my sister. I'll not sit by. You'll do as you're bid, Oberyn, or I shall not speak to you again. Remember your promise, brother. No, not on this. I'll not forgive this, Elia. I'll not see you cover for that man, he said as he walked away. Oberyn, Oberyn. His sister shouted as she began to cry. Just like that, the images were gone, and he sat there looking at the unlit candles. If he didn't hear the dragon chirping, he'd not believe what he just saw. How can you do that? I do not know. I'm still learning. Rhaenys has been teaching me, but I haven't seen the past before, nor the future yet, Jon said. Future. I have dreams. I've seen things. Rhaenys showed me things, Jon said sadly. Yeah. Rhaenys, which is it? I don't understand any of this. Neither do I completely. It's coming. I get some of it, but what I know is we were bonded through the dragon and the egg. I did something, changed it. I don't know what, but Rhaenys is Rhaenys, Rhaenys is Rhaenys. She is my sister. What do you want from me? I have something for you. I don't know what it says, only it's from Elia, Jon said, walking to the chest and taking out a letter before walking back towards him. Where did you get this? It was left among my things. Take it. When you've read it, we'll talk some more, Jon said, handing him the letter. He sat there and read it, and reread it, crying as he did so. He felt the dragon's wings as she flew to his shoulder, felt her head against his own as he sat there sobbing, holding the letter in his hands.